As the movie begins, we saw a young couple, Pippa and Thomas, who were excited since they've just moved into their first apartment together in Montreal, which they got in much low cost. They signed the lease agreement and finalized the deal. That night the couple discuss their relationship and Pippa asks Thomas if they can have kids, which gets Thomas worried, but she laughs and says she was joking. She doesn't want kids early and they have at least 4 years for that. Thomas was happy to hear that, and they were having a moment there. But soon realizes that their windows looked directly into the apartment across the street, where a man was taking photographs of a woman. Pippa and Thomas watch with excitement as the couple turns to have an intimate session with their curtains fully open. Thomas continues to watch at first, but stops as Pippa says to give their neighbors some privacy. Later they jokingly give their neighbors funny names Margot and Brent. That night Pippa addresses and gets ready to have some of what their neighbors were having, but Thomas falls asleep early and leaves her sexually frustrated. Pippa, who works as a trainee at an eye care hospital, she receives a bird feeder from her boss as a housewarming gift. While walking home, Pippa sees a pair of binoculars on a shelf in a store and decides to buy them so she and Thomas can watch the couple. They often see Brent having sex with several models while Margot is out. At night Pippa and Thomas were watching their neighbor doing some hot nasty things with a model and they get excited, so they try to do the same. Unfortunately Thomas fails to keep up and prematurely finishes, which frustrates Pippa. The next day Pippa and Thomas have lunch with Pippa's co-worker Ari and Thomas' sister Joni. They told them about their neighbors and even gossips whether Brent was cheating on Margot or whether the couple are in an open relationship. Pippa expresses interest in knowing what the neighbors are doing. By looking at her excitement, Joni tells them that Thomas knows a trick to listen from another room with the help laser pointer. The process requires a reflective surface to send the laser beam back to them, which means they have to sneak into their neighbor's apartment and place a mirror pointed towards their own apartment's window. When Brent and Margot throw a Halloween costume party in their apartment, Pippa and Thomas sneak in by posing as guests. They blend in with the crowd and Pippa plants a small mirror in the apartment, later allowing Pippa and Thomas to listen conversations of them. They were shocked to hear Margot confronting Brent about his sexual affairs. Margot then breaks her glasses and Brent convinces her that her suspicions are unfounded and that she is just looking for an excuse for them to break their marriage. The next day Margot, who we learn her real name is Julia, visits eye care hospital where she receives an eye exam from Pippa and orders a new set of stylish glasses recommended by her. Before she leaves, Julia invites Pippa to hang out for a cup of coffee sometime. Pippa comes back home and tells Thomas the news and says she wants to warn Julia about Brent's affairs, but Thomas insists that she stop interfering with the neighbors as it's none of her business. Later Pippa and Julia meet at a spa. Julia reveals that her husband is named Sebastian. He is a well-known photographer. She also suggests that she will introduce her to him. At some point Pippa gets obsessed with Sebastian and continues to spy on him in secret from Thomas. She observes him have a threesome and throwing the used condom away afterwards, even during the night. She sneaks out of her bed to see if her neighbor is up. She later discovers how to access Julia and Sebastian's wireless printer, which she uses to anonymously expose Sebastian's affairs to Julia, mentioning the condom as proof. Later Pippa was watching them, but Thomas angrily confronts Pippa about being so interested in Julia and Sebastian's lives. Thomas and Pippa watch as Julia picks up a knife in fear they're about to witness a murder, but Julia backs away at the last moment. Frustrated with Pippa, Thomas takes her binoculars and smashes them in the ground. The next morning Pippa apologizes to Thomas and promises to stop watching the neighbors. However, they then see Sebastian hiding Julia's body in the bathroom after she seemingly slit her own throat. Thomas angrily blames Pippa for Julia's death since she was so obsessed with their neighbor's relationship, but she wouldn't listen to anything he says. He breaks up with her and leaves. Few months pass by, and although heartbroken, Pippa continues to watch Sebastian and imagine herself comforting the beautiful cheating prick. Then one evening she decides to follow him to a nearby bar. Sebastian notices Pippa and goes to sit by her, and they talk about masturbation and how Sebastian finds it weird that it's normalized for couples in a relationship to do it, like use a vibrator, but when that person sleeps with someone else it's deemed unacceptable for some reason. He then asks her to let him photograph her at his apartment, which she accepts. As they walk back to his place, Sebastian picks up his keys just outside the door. As they begin the photograph session, Sebastian manages to convince Pippa to strip naked and pose nude for him, and as the chick magnet that he was, she can't say no and do the same. The moment got heated up and they eventually have the long-awaited sexy time that Pippa imagined for so long. At the same time, unlucky Thomas returns to the apartment to apologize. He takes the drink which was left in the refrigerator and pours some of it into the bird feeder. Then he takes the binoculars and sees Pippa having hot pleasure intercourse across the street. Next morning, Pippa returns home to an open door only to find Thomas dead in their apartment, having apparently hanged himself. After seeing this, Pippa was in shock. She calls the emergency, but the guilt was consuming her for a long period. Pippa confesses to Ari about everything that happened. Ari reassures her that none of it is her fault as she was dumped and didn't know what would happen. The girls then decide to go to Sebastian's exhibition, which turns out to be a collaboration with Julia, whose death was fake, and she is still alive. Pippa and Thomas are revealed to be the subjects of the exhibition. They show the naked picture Sebastian took of Pippa in his apartment. They even revealed that they own the apartment rented by Pippa and Thomas. Julia knew they were being watched. While watching them back, they knew about the planted microphone and the suicide of Thomas, which were all photographed and shown in the exhibition. Stressed, Pippa bursts in tears. She goes back to Sebastian's apartment, which she breaks in after remembering where Sebastian keeps his key, and notice a hidden studio which contains all the photographs her neighbors have taken. Pippa smashes and destroys the place. Move out of the apartment. She takes the bird feeder when she notices the dead birds just below, as she looks to see Julia's sly smile across the street. Sebastian and Julia give an interview after their exhibition, explaining that reading the terms and conditions in the lease agreement is the tenant's responsibility to check. While Julia seems quite happy with what they've done, Sebastian looks upset and guilty with how the situation turned out. In the interview, it is revealed that Sebastian and Julia have made a lot of money in their little voyeur show, turned into a worldwide success as people all over the world are interested in the story. Sebastian and Julia return home to find a congratulatory bottle of wine by their door. As they drink the wine, Pippa sends a message to their printer saying she knows Thomas didn't commit suicide and that they killed him. They spot her on the roof and chase after her after Pippa leads them into eye care hospital. Pippa deduces that while she was getting it on with Sebastian, Julia poisoned Thomas's drink and staged his suicide because of the dead birds she saw that drank the same liquid. Pippa also reveals that she mixed a drug in their wine, causing Julia and Sebastian to faint. Moments later, Pippa places her two unconscious neighbors under a laser machine, using it to burn their eyes. Sometime later, a new couple have moved into Pippa and Thomas's former apartment. They notice they can see everything in the neighbor's apartment across the street. We then see Sebastian and Julia, both of whom are now blind. Pippa watches them from the rooftop before leaving her binoculars behind, having exacted revenge for what they've done to her and Thomas. If you guys like explanation, please do like and subscribe to the channel.